this edition of Impact,
what's happening today is you have to be very good, very young, if you want to dance in a professional company. You have to be too good, too young.
practice does not always make perfect. But first, persistence pays off for one extraordinary youth.
Before, when I was little, I couldn't build stuff like this because I didn't have the patience, but now I can really see the rewards of actually working really hard on something.
Welcome to a special edition of Impact. I'm Audrey Kim. In this program, we look at two very different passions, one in the arts and the other science. In our first story, we found a young man whose passion for science finds him with something called vertigo. But in this case, not a fear of heights. Take a look.
Turn around! Turn around! Okay.
This is big and as good as it gets, folks. Level 3 is the goal to attain in the hobby. 9 rings are clear. Launching in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We dropped the igniter out on that one.
When I saw my first rocket, my mom, she didn't want to buy it for me. And then it was one of those things where I was like, please mom, please mom, please mom. Like, okay, ask your dad. And then, that secretly means yes. So I asked dad and he's like, yeah, let's build this rocket.
David Roy was 7 when his father bought him his first rocket kit.
And we sat there for about 4 or 5 hours because he doesn't like to read instructions and stuff. So we were figuring it all out and everything, and we finally flew it. I would have never got into rockets if it wasn't for my dad.
David was an ordinary kid with an extraordinary interest in science and building things.
Before, when I was little, I couldn't build stuff like this because I didn't have the patience, but now I can really see the rewards of actually working really hard on something.
David's father, Ernie Roy, was a biology teacher.
Mr. Roy, I have my title, research, and procedure for my science project.
He required all his students and his son to participate in science fairs. David spent his weekends building rockets and preparing them for competition. This rocket, named Vertigo, is David's crowning achievement. The handmade case is built of carbon fiber and titanium. A special nose cone allows it to break the sound barrier without disintegrating.
The feeling that you get when you work so hard for hours and hours and sometimes days or years, and then it works properly and all your work is worth it, that's just, that's the best feeling in the world. That's why I build rockets.
In model rocketry, one crash can wipe out a major investment of time and money. Vertigo took a year and almost $5,000 to build. David is careful.
I've done this a lot of times, always read the instructions.
How much does it cost every time you fly this thing?
60, 70 bucks, depending on the size of the motor.
Craig Peterson is a professor at the California Institute of Technology and an engineer at the Pasadena Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
The model rocket industry has gone to great lengths to produce inexpensive and reliable small rocket motors, but this is an entirely different class of rocket that this young man has developed.
Peterson read a newspaper article about David's rocket, which flies 7,000 feet high.
It's higher than basically any rocket went up until World War II. I was also amazed at the ambition that this young man had displayed by building a rocket of this size and power.
But that ambition doesn't come from thin air. Ernie Roy was diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2000. He died a year later.
I didn't go to school for a month, just coming to the realization that, my dad wouldn't be able to see me graduate from high school or college or start a family. That hurt a lot.
I had to overcome my own grief while helping my son through his. I found that I had a strength that I didn't know I possessed.
Ernie Roy had taught David about hard times.
He told David about the experiences he had growing up in the Jim Crow South. He had to drink water from the Negro water fountain.
Roy grew up in Oklahoma. His school was desegregated in 1955, but he still suffered discrimination in the classroom. Roy told his teachers he wanted to become a doctor. They recommended carpentry instead.
Ernie spent a great deal of time explaining to David what that meant, being made to feel less than human.
His teachers always told him, well, you should go into like manual labor or whatever, because like you're never gonna be able to do anything else.
Roy ignored their advice. He got a college degree, moved to Los Angeles, and became a teacher. From there, his educational career took off.
He proved all those people wrong. He got his master's and his doctorate. He was a principal at a brand new medical magnet school. That was his dream.
David had heard his father's lessons many times. Try as hard as you can in life and never let tough circumstances hold you back.
He always told me, he said, do it right the first time or don't do it at all.
But when his father passed away, David didn't feel like doing anything at all, including rocketry.
For a while, I just kind of didn't do it. I sort of felt, it might sound weird, but I was betraying my dad that I was still doing his stuff and he wasn't there to enjoy it.
Months later, David began reaching out to friends.
They said, this is what you're really good at. You're really talented at this. You should keep doing it. And that really helped me work through the pain of my dad dying.
David realized a new rocket, one that pushed the limits of his technical skills, would be the ultimate tribute to his father.
Put on forward, Rich.
For that, he would need some help.
David's quite capable of building and launching projects.
Bill Siders is an expert rocket maker.
Unfortunately, he's not 18 years old yet, so he can't really do any of these things on his own, but he's quite capable of competing with even the most experienced adult here.
When Siders learned of David's plan to build Vertigo, he decided to work with him.
Just do a straight down cut.
Siders lets David use his workshop and helps him with the most difficult tasks, like making the specialty parts for Vertigo. Joseph Beckles is a sculptor from David's neighborhood.
Come on, you can make it.
He gives David design tips for Vertigo.
My work is to deal with humanizing our relationship to the world. And his is sort of to stretch the relationship as to where we can go with our knowledge. I could help create a balance for him.
I always had a feeling that he was going to be very different and very gifted. He was always taking things apart to see how they worked. When he was about 4 or 5, I took him to Toys R Us and got a toy that I thought would keep him busy all afternoon, and he put it together in the car coming home.
But Vertigo would be the ultimate challenge.
First, I thought it was going to be just like any other rocket I had built, take a few hours, after I designed it, but it turned out being like a year from start to finish. Yeah, that was really a surprise.
The efforts finally paid off when David entered Vertigo in a competition for African-American youth. He easily won in the physics division and was invited to compete at nationals in Miami, Florida. Then, the morning of David's flight, the Roys discovered the unthinkable.
I got up to let the dog out, and I noticed that when I went out to get the paper that a window was broken. The more I looked around, the more I began to realize things were out of order. And I walked back in and I asked David, did he take his rocket in his bedroom? He said no.
The rocket had been stolen. David had to decide whether to go, which meant competing with just his display materials.
I let David make the decision whether he wanted to go to Miami to compete or not. And fortunately, he made the decision to go ahead, which is what his dad would have wanted him to do.
But without Vertigo to back him up, David didn't even place in the competition. Back in Los Angeles, he combed the neighborhood pawn shops. His mother contacted one of Ernie's former students, now a reporter for the Los Angeles Times. There was nothing left to do. 3 months later, a neighbor called to say Vertigo had turned up in her backyard. Within hours, the rocket was safely back in David's hands.
One of the guys at work showed me the newspaper and said this kid found his rocket, and I looked at that and I said, hey, that's Dave, on the front cover of the paper. So it was pretty cool. That was wild.
The story is now a legend in rocketry circles.
When this rocket got stolen, it was, it's like, because we're a real tight-knit organization, and we were all going to pitch together and get him parts to build another one. Well, now he's going to put it up today. So that's very cool. So as far as I'm concerned, he won.
David continues to take his hobby to new heights. He's built a new model, Ozymandias, and plans to compete again at this year's national competition, this time with both rockets.
I never thought I'd be driving to the desert to fly rockets or, going to Miami. This thing has just really gone far beyond what I ever thought. And I get that strength from David, because when I say no, if he feels really strongly about something, especially to do with his rocketry, he will explain to me why it needs to be done.
David is well aware of an irony. His rockets might not exist if his father were still alive.
He liked rocket and stuff, but he also didn't like spending a lot of money on rockets. Like $1,200 on a nose cone, he would have been like, okay, you're crazy. And building motors, $100 a flight. Because before that, I had only been, say, $20 a flight, and he was getting mad, like, David, it's so expensive for one flight.
With just Mom holding the purse strings, some things have gotten easier.
So basically, I just write the checks and make sure these things happen.
David goes to college this fall, but he's not yet sure about his future.
I want to get my doctorate in something. I guess it'd be aerospace engineering. Maybe start my own company doing something.
Like his dad, he'll aim high at whatever he chooses to do.
He worked like really hard his entire life to achieve the best he could. That's like the highest goal for me. It's like reach that same level where I've like realized every dream that I've had.
For now, he keeps flying rockets. That's just fine with Cassandra Roy.
I like the camaraderie of the people that are there. It's nice to see people who don't have any hidden agendas. They really don't care that David is African American. The only thing they care about is his passion for rockets, which they all have.
A passion that still connects father and son.
He would have been happy that I had done something so. People call this rocket a masterpiece. They call Vertigo a masterpiece, and I'm really happy that I was able to make it, because when I look back when I was little and I was building like tiny little rockets, if I had seen that, I would have been speechless. That was perfect.
That's fine.
He has about 7,000 feet. I'll see once I get the data off of the computer, but it was up there. I'm always a little bit worried until the chute opens.
Our next story takes us to the arts. We found some young people who endure competition, painful injuries, and often tears, just for a chance to hit center stage.
The grace, the allure, the trials, the agony, the defeat. That's what it means to dance.
I never liked auditioning. I hated auditioning.
There could be 55 or 50 people in an audition and they're looking for one spot.
When I was auditioning for colleges, they were both like that, for dance colleges. UCI, and then I also auditioned for University of Utah. And then when I went back east to audition for companies after I graduated, and Boston Ballet was like that. It was a cattle call audition. It was huge.
I went to Boston's one year, and there was over 100 girls there, and so they just cut lines of girls at a time because you can't look at everybody.
You go to some auditions, and they'll just line you up and say, okay, point your foot. And if you don't have the right kind of foot, they'll be like, okay, they're not going to pick you.
Unfair, but it's the way it is.
Sometimes on auditions they have a specific requirements. They are looking only for tall, blonde girl, or they are looking opposite for small girls because they have, for example, two small boys. They're looking for partners for them.
So if they have a really like graceful tall dancer that's leaving, they want to replace her with that kind of person. It doesn't matter how talented you are. Well, it does, but I mean, to some extent, if you're a short athletic dancer, they're just not going to hire you if that's what they're looking for.
I went to an audition once, and I happened to meet the director of the company at the stage door at the same time as I was entering. So I introduced myself, and I said, I'm Jacqueline Pavlich, here to audition for the company this afternoon. And he said, don't waste my time, and turned around and walked away. You're too short. And that was the end.
So some auditions have a